I was browsing through the depths of Reddit, searching for something to take my mind off the mundane routine of everyday life. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had exhausted all other avenues of entertainment. As I scrolled through the endless feed, one particular subreddit caught my eye. The title read "Unsettling Nights," and the description promised a platform where fear and reality converge. My curiosity piqued. I clicked on it and was immediately drawn in by a series of posts that seemed to defy explanation. There were threads about sleep paralysis, shared experiences of waking up with strange markings on one's body, and even some claims of being stalked by an entity in the dead of night. The comments section was filled with users sharing their own terrifying encounters, often accompanied by eerie images and audio files. I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine as I delved deeper into the subreddit. It was as if I had stumbled upon something that didn't belong in the real world. The posts seemed to be drawing me in, making me feel like I was part of a twisted game. I spent hours scrolling through the threads, unable to tear myself away from the sense of unease that permeated every comment. It wasn't until I saw the username Echo14 that I realized this was no ordinary subreddit. The user's posts were always well written, but there was something unsettling about their tone, a sense of knowing that went beyond the realm of human comprehension. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to Echo14 to see if they would respond. It was then that I noticed a peculiar trend. Every post from Echo14 ended with a single phrase: "The dreamers are coming." I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had stumbled upon something sinister. Despite my reservations, I decided to delve deeper into the Unsettling Nights subreddit. As I scrolled through the threads, I started to notice a pattern. Every post seemed to be connected to vivid nightmares and eerie awakenings. The users who shared these experiences spoke of being haunted by dark entities that lurked in the shadows of their minds. I tried to dismiss it as mere fantasy, but the more I read, the more I felt like I was being pulled into a world beyond my own. It started with small things. I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with an overwhelming sense of dread that seemed to linger long after I woke up. At first, I wrote it off as stress and anxiety, but then I started to experience more vivid dreams, like I was actually inside someone's nightmare. The images were seared into my mind, twisted creatures lurking in the corners, disembodied voices whispering in the dead of night. I felt like I was losing control, like the boundaries between reality and dreams were blurring. One post in particular caught my attention. A user named Lost in the Haze shared a dream they had about being chased by an army of shadowy figures that seemed to be made of smoke and darkness. The image was haunting, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was more than just a product of their imagination. As I continued to explore the subreddit, I started to notice strange anomalies. Comments would appear out of nowhere, and users would suddenly change their username or post about something entirely different. It was as if they were being manipulated by some unseen force. And then, there were the echoes, faint whispers in my ear when I wasn't looking at my phone, faint messages that seemed to come from nowhere. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized that I was no longer alone in this digital realm. I started to notice a pattern. Every time I entered the Unsettling Nights subreddit, I was met with an influx of terrifying content. The users seemed to be obsessed with understanding what was happening, and they would share their own experiences, trying to piece together the puzzle. I found myself becoming increasingly obsessed with unraveling the mystery, devouring post after post in a desperate attempt to understand what was going on. The stories were always so vivid, so real. I felt like I was living through them, my heart racing as I turned the pages. The users seemed to be talking about something that was beyond their control, some sort of force that was manipulating them into sharing these dark and twisted tales. I started to feel like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, unable to wake up from the horror that surrounded me. Every comment, every post, every image seemed to be linked to the others, forming a web of terror that threatened to consume me whole. I began to wonder if I was one of them. Was I just another victim of this mysterious force? The more I read, the more I felt like I was losing myself in the abyss of the subreddit. It was as if I had stumbled upon a portal to some dark and ancient realm, where terrors beyond human comprehension lurked in every shadow. And then, there were the echoes, whispers in my ear when no one was around, faint messages that seemed to come from nowhere. I started to feel like I was being pulled into this world, like I was becoming a part of it somehow. The lines between reality and dreams began to blur, and I knew I had to get out before it was too late. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I created an account on Reddit and tried to infiltrate the mysterious subreddit. At first, it seemed like a daunting task. The threads were endless, and the posts were becoming increasingly disturbing. But I was determined to uncover the truth behind unsettling nights. I started by reading through some of the older posts, looking for any clues that might lead me to the heart of the mystery. The stories were all so different, yet they shared a common thread, a sense of unease and dread that lingered long after the post was finished. As I delved deeper into the subreddit, I started to notice strange patterns. Certain users would post about the same things over and over again, as if they were trying to convey some sort of message. Others seemed to be arguing with each other, their comments becoming increasingly heated and personal. It was like they were trapped in a never-ending cycle of terror, unable to escape the clutches of something that haunted them. I tried to join in on the conversation, posting my own thoughts and theories about the subreddit. But it was like trying to join a dark and twisted game. Everyone seemed to be playing by their own rules, and I wasn't sure what the objective was. As the night wore on, I started to feel a creeping sense of dread. It was as if I had stumbled into something that was far beyond my control. The subreddit seemed to be alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that threatened to consume me whole. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw a post that made my blood run cold. It was from one of the users who had been posting about the same thing over and over again, a story about something called the Devourer. According to the post, the Devourer was an ancient entity that fed on fear and terror. And if you listened closely, it would whisper your name into your ear when you were alone at night. I knew then that I had to get out of there fast. But as I clicked the close button on my browser, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The Devourer might be just a myth, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never set foot in that subreddit again. I tried to brush it off as mere paranoia, but the feeling of being watched lingered long after I closed my browser. It wasn't until the next night, when I received a private message from one of the users on Reddit, that I realized the true extent of the threat. "You shouldn't have looked for us," the message read. "Now you'll never be able to escape." I tried to ignore it, but the words sent a chill down my spine. Who was this person, and how did they know about my online activities? I decided to investigate further, digging deeper into the world of unsettling nights and its mysterious users. But as I delved deeper, I began to realize that I was in over my head. The more I read, the more I felt like I was being herded towards some unknown fate. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw him. He was standing in front of me, his eyes black as coal and his skin stretched tight over his skull. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure didn't move or speak. It simply regarded me with an unblinking gaze. I knew then that I had to get out of there fast, but as I turned to run, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was cold and clammy, and it seemed to be pulling me back into the darkness. I tried to shake it off, but the grip only tightened. The last thing I remember is the feeling of being dragged down into a sea of shadows, with no escape in sight. As I continued to explore the subreddit, I encountered more and more unsettling content. The posts were like nothing I had ever seen before. They were as if the authors had stumbled into some sort of twisted dream world, where the laws of reality no longer applied. I started to question whether it was all just part of some sick game designed to push people to their limits. But the more I read, the more I felt like I was being pulled in deeper. The users seemed to be sharing their deepest fears and darkest secrets, as if they were trying to summon something from the depths of their own psyche. I tried to distance myself, but it was no use. I was hooked. The stories were too vivid, too real to resist. And then there were the images. Oh God, the images. They were like nothing I had ever seen before, twisted, surreal landscapes that seemed to shift and writhe on the screen like living things. I felt my stomach churn as I scrolled through them, wondering what kind of person would create such atrocities. But even those couldn't prepare me for what was coming next. The next night, I received a message from one of the users, a simple text that read, "I've been waiting for you." I tried to ignore it, but my heart was racing as I realized that someone had been watching me, following my every move. And then the messages started pouring in, not just random words, but full-on conversations with people who seemed to know more about me than they should. It was like being trapped in some kind of twisted game show, where the stakes were my sanity and my soul. I tried to log out, to shut down the computer and pretend it never happened. But the messages kept coming, a constant stream of disturbing images and cryptic warnings that left me feeling like I was walking on eggshells. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I saw him again. This time he was standing right in front of me, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "Welcome to the game," he hissed, before disappearing into thin air. I stumbled backward, my heart racing with fear. What did it all mean? And who was behind it all? As I continued to explore the subreddit, I began to notice a change in the community. At first, it was just a few subtle signs, a post that seemed more aggressive than usual, or a comment that seemed to be directed at me specifically. But as time went on, the behavior became more and more egregious. The users were becoming increasingly hostile and aggressive, and I realized that I wasn't alone in my fascination with the mysterious subreddit. There were others out there, people who shared my interest and my sense of morbid curiosity. We were all drawn to the same thing, a collective obsession with the unknown, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying. And yet, despite our shared interests, we were all being pulled in different directions. Some were getting more and more entrenched in their own individual obsessions, while others were starting to feel like they were losing themselves in the process. I was one of the latter. I had always been a bit of a loner, content to spend my time alone with my books and my thoughts. But now, I found myself drawn into this strange world of Reddit users, all of us united in our quest for knowledge and understanding. And yet, as I delved deeper into the community, I began to realize that there was something more sinister at play. The users were not just sharing their own stories and experiences. They were also manipulating each other, playing on their fears and anxieties in order to get a rise out of them. It was like some kind of twisted game, one that I was both fascinated by and terrified of. And then one night, I received a message from one of the users. "You're next," it read. "It's time for you to join the community." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I had become a part of something much bigger than myself, something that was beyond my control. And yet, despite my growing unease, I couldn't help but feel drawn back in. The Reddit community was like a dark magnet, pulling me in with its promises of knowledge and understanding. But at what cost? I was awoken by a terrifying dream. I had been walking through a dark and abandoned street, the only sound being the echo of my own footsteps. Suddenly, I was face to face with a figure that seemed to be made of darkness itself. It loomed over me, its presence filling the air with an unspeakable horror. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The figure began to laugh, a sound that was like nothing I had ever heard before. It was a laugh that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. When I woke up, I felt a sense of unease that lingered long after I sat up in bed. My room was filled with an eerie, pulsing light that seemed to be watching me. The darkness outside my window seemed to be pressing in on me, making it hard to breathe. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, telling myself it was just a dream and that I was safe in my own home. But the feeling persisted, a nagging sense that something was very wrong. I threw off the covers and got out of bed, trying to find some way to calm myself down. As I walked over to the window, I saw my reflection staring back at me. But it wasn't my reflection, it was a dark, twisted version of myself, with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, except for the pulsing light that continued to watch me. I knew then that I had to get out of there, to find some way to escape the feeling of being trapped and watched. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On my wall, in letters that seemed to be written in blood, was a message. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the darkness outside my window seemed to be closing in on me. The pulsing light grew brighter, and I could feel its presence like a living thing. Suddenly, the room was filled with multiple, concurrent terrors. I saw versions of myself, each one twisted and distorted, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They reached out to me, their fingers grasping for me like claws. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into total darkness. When they came back on, I saw that I was no longer alone. There were people in the room with me, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. They moved closer, their eyes burning with an evil intensity. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The next thing I knew, I was facing a giant spider, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. It loomed over me, its legs stretching out like skeletal fingers. I tried to move, but I was paralyzed with fear. The spider began to speak, its voice like a rusty gate. "You should not have come here," it hissed. "Now you will never leave." As the spider spoke, the room began to distort and twist, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. I saw monsters from my childhood, creatures that had haunted my dreams for years. They closed in on me, their eyes blazing with a malevolent intensity. I knew then that I was facing my greatest fear of all, the darkness within myself. As they tried to make sense of what was happening, discovered a hidden message board within the subreddit. It was filled with cryptic clues and references to ancient mythology. The first message read, "The eyes that see are not the ones that look." Below it, another message was posted. "The threads that bind us are also the ones that blind us." I stared at the screen, my mind racing with possibilities. Who could have created this? And what did they mean by these cryptic messages? I scrolled down further, and my eyes landed on a post from a user named the Archivist. It read, "The truth is not in the surface, but beneath it." Beneath the message was a link to an old article about an ancient cult that believed in the power of hidden symbols. According to the article, these symbols held the key to unlocking hidden knowledge and powers. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read on. The more I delved into the subreddit, the more I realized that this was not just a game or a prank. It was something much deeper and more sinister. The messages were like breadcrumbs, leading me further and further down a rabbit hole of ancient mysteries and forbidden knowledge. And at the center of it all was the question: what was happening to me? Why was I being subjected to these strange occurrences? And what lay beneath the surface of this subreddit, waiting to be uncovered? As I delved deeper into the subreddit, I became more and more convinced that the mysterious force behind it was real. It was an ancient evil that fed on fear, and they were determined to uncover its secrets. The more I read, the more I felt like I was being pulled into a labyrinth of twisted corridors and dark chambers. Every step I took brought me closer to the heart of the mystery, but also further away from the light of day. I began to feel like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no escape from the terrors that lurked within. The messages on the subreddit seemed to be getting more and more cryptic, as if they were trying to lead me deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. "The eyes that see are not the ones that look," one message read. "The threads that bind us are also the ones that blind us." I knew that I had to keep going, no matter how scared I was. I had to uncover the truth behind the subreddit and face whatever horrors lay within. But as I took another step forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The darkness seemed to be closing in around me, and I knew that I was running out of time. Suddenly, the screen went black and I was plunged into total darkness. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from all directions. They were getting closer and closer until I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, everything stopped. The darkness was silence and I was left standing there, wondering what had happened next. I had reached the depths of my own subconscious, and what I found was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. The darkness was absolute, with no bounds or edges to speak of. It was a void that seemed to stretch on forever with no beginning or end in sight. And yet, despite its infinite vastness, it felt suffocatingly small, like a tiny speck in an endless ocean. I stumbled forward blindly, unsure of what lay ahead. The ground beneath my feet was spongy and uneven, like a thick layer of moss that seemed to swallow up the light around me. Every step echoed through the void, making it seem like I was walking on air. The silence was oppressive, weighing heavily on my chest like a physical force. And then, without warning, I saw it. A figure, twisted and distorted, its features blurred beyond recognition. It moved towards me, its pace slow and deliberate, like a creature stalking its prey. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The figure drew closer, its presence filling the void with an unspeakable horror. I felt my mind recoiling in terror, unable to process what it was seeing. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished into thin air. I stumbled forward blindly, trying to make sense of what had happened. But there was nothing to see. No signs of struggle, no hints of where it had gone. Just an endless expanse of darkness, stretching out before me like a chasm of despair. I knew then that I had crossed into the realm of the unknown, where terror had no bounds and the rules of reality were mere suggestions. And in that moment, I was consumed by a sense of dread so profound that it threatened to consume my very soul.